Welcome to today's KM World webinar brought to you by Ephesoft. I'm Mary D. Ojala, Conference Program Director, Information Today, Inc. I will be the moderator for today's broadcast. Our presentation today is titled Hyperautomation in 2022, Avoiding the Sprawl. Before we get started, I want to explain how you can be a part of this broadcast. There will be a question and answer session. If you have a question during the presentation, just type it into the question box provided and click on the submit button. We will try to get to as many questions as possible, but if your question has not been selected during the show, you will receive an email response to it within a few days. And notice that underneath that question box, there is a box with handouts that you can download. Plus, all viewers will be entered to win a $100 Amazon gift card just for viewing today's webinar. And now to introduce our speakers for today. Stephen Bowles, SVP, Strategy and Evangelism, Ephesoft. Gretchen Perry, Senior Director, Slalom Consulting. And now let me pass the event over to Stephen Bowles, SVP, Strategy and Evangelism, Ephesoft. Go ahead, Steve.
Thanks, Mary D. So really quickly, I'll do a quick agenda. We'll talk a little bit about hyperautomation and get a level set on what it is from a definition perspective. Then we'll talk about Sprawl, and we'll define that and give you an overview. We'll go into hyperautomation and the role that intelligent document processing plays. And then we'll provide some guidance on how to avoid and navigate that sprawl that's been affecting a lot of our customers and partners out there. So as a first step, I always like to get a level set for the discussion and make sure that we're all on the same page from a definition perspective. And so hyperautomation, if you do a search on Google, you'll come up with a million hits and a million different nuances to how people define and describe it. It's a broadly used term, and I find it used just about everywhere with loose meaning. So here's a level set definition that I like from TechTarget. Hyperautomation is a framework and a set of advanced technologies for scaling automation in the enterprise. And the ultimate goal of hyperautomation, kind of that peak or what everybody's shooting for, is to develop processes to automate the automation, right? That's the end goal, is to get to a point where you're as automated as possible, as well as being able to automate those particular processes within your organization. So why the big push? Why is hyperautomation? Is it just a buzzword? Is it seen as critical to organizations? So if you examine the last decade, it's been a mix of initiatives that have been focused on process automation, digital transformation, and digitization. Good, I said that word correctly. The whole goal has been to drive business value using technology. Many of those initiatives have failed to provide the desired business outcomes and have fallen short of the goals. And we'll talk about some of the reasons in a bit. But with hyperautomation, the entire tool set can now be leveraged to not only provide low-level process and task efficiencies, but you can combine them all to help the organization really change the way they do business and provide competitive advantage and actually disrupt industries.
And now we're going to move into a poll. So, where do you consider your organization in the hyperautomation journey? And your choices are: we are just beginning automating processes. We have automated around 25% of our processes and will continue to do more. We have automated around 50% or more of our processes and will continue to do more. Or we have no plans. So let's move over here and let's you choose which of these answers you think represents your organization. And we are seeing results coming in, flooding in, so do click whichever one of those is the most relevant to your situation. And let's move
it's
over.
always interesting.
Yeah, well,
It's
let's
interesting
move over
to see
let's move over so our
how these
viewers can see
change.
the answers. Okay, and there we go. So, Steve, what do you think?
It's just beginning is typically what we see. It's interesting over time and over the years we've been doing these. We kind of ask the same question, and there's a lot less folks in the no plans zone, which I find encouraging. It looks like about 79-80% of folks are starting to get out there and get things done from a hyper automation perspective.
Yeah. Sort of looks like it's a tie between the just beginning and around 25%. Yeah. Well, let's go back to that definition for a minute. I have to tell you that I had a really funny experience this morning where I pulled up a web document and the word hyperautomation was in it, and Word told me that it couldn't fact check or it couldn't spell check because that word was German and it didn't have the German spell checking. And I'm like, German? What? Huh? So let me just ask you, Gretchen, the definition that Steve put up. Do you agree with that, or is there anything else you would add to it?
Mary D, I do agree with it. When I first saw the term, I pictured a bunch of robots like all hyped up on caffeine, but that is not hyperautomation. How I like to think about it is just like Steve said, automating everything in an organization that can be automated with the intent to streamline processes across the organization using these various intelligent automation tools. How I also like to think of it is kind of a state of organizational flow, and as clients are looking to marry artificial intelligence with human intelligence, hyperautomation is that ultimate goal where artificial intelligence complements the human intelligence across business and organizational processes, right? Where artificial intelligence does the task and process and processing tasks or opportunities, and the human beings actually help analyze, make sense of the data, and take the decisions. So all about getting the right information, the right people at the right time, ultimately to produce the right outcome.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Steve, you mentioned digital transformation when you were talking about the definition there.
Sure.
So how does the hyperautomation differ from digital transformation? We hear digital transformation an awful lot these days.
Yeah, we've got a lot of fluff words, right? I think, in my opinion, digital transformation was a precursor to the hyperautomation revolution. There's a number of definitions, but I see it as a kind of a push to digitize everything in your organization and kind of move away from that legacy technology and the business of the way of doing business with paper, right? So essentially it was no paper, no file cabinets, eliminate things like fax and folders for routing around the office, and really take things to the next level. Unfortunately, I think digital transformation was kind of a processes gone wild, right? People just went in, they did things. The whole goal was efficiency, and unfortunately it created kind of a massive process mess. And a lot of the organizations out there exchanged their physical headaches for digital headaches, right? So hyperautomation was kind of the next logical step. Take all that digital inefficiency that you created and start to look at it with a microscope, right? Automate it, and the creation of that new automation.
And I think underlying all that is the question of value. Whatever you're calling it, the issue is how much value does it have for the organization? So when you had your slide up there about cheaper, faster, better. So let me ask Gretchen in terms of that. Just what's the deal with your market and primary drivers for the organization when it comes to the hyperautomation?
Yeah, great question, Mary D. Well, I should explain. So although Slalom is a large management consulting firm focused on business and technology across strategy and implementation, the world I live in is with our public sector clients. So helping our state, local government, and education really provide more impact in helping and protecting and building resilience in our communities. So when I look at public sector specifically, which typically, of course, lags its commercial counterparts in technology adoption, automation is still largely in its infancy. We're seeing it in the typical places like invoices, HR, financial processes, but the primary drivers are exactly what Steve mentioned: faster, cheaper, better. The potential is huge, and what I'm really excited about for our public sector clients to take advantage of is not only the process automation, the benefits that can deliver, but also the intelligent processing. And I know Steve's going to get to this with intelligent document processing, but that processing of physical and digital documents for our government clients is really where I think the promise of hyperautomation is especially exciting. And this is not just taking digital and paper documents and translating that text into data that can be reused. It's actually even unlocking new data sets. That there's so much data, especially in justice and public safety, which is my background, where documents like incident reports, court orders, protection orders, warrants, all these documents represent key decision points or milestones, right, in a major business process. And those documents provide the triggering event for a number of processes involving a variety of stakeholders. So seeing there's a ton of different values, and what we do is work with our clients to say, a ton of different drivers on the value of automation, and what are their drivers? What are they looking for the business outcomes of any automation initiative, so that we're designing the initiative to achieve those outcomes.
Steve, what's your take on that?
Yeah, before I get into my spiel, I agree with Gretchen. What we've seen is documents are kind of the last frontier, right? There's a ton of dark and hidden data in there that is just so valuable for organizations. Anyway, I digress. I'll talk more about that in a bit. But for us in document processing, most of the organizations that we deal with have really zoomed out from the kind of the tactical task and process focus, and really now have a strategic focus on business outcomes across the whole organization, right? Where can we focus for competitive advantage? How can we change the game in our market or be performant compared to other organizations? And then cheaper and faster is really great, but if you focus on cross-departmental processes that touch a large portion of the business, you can really make incredible strides towards what I call disruptive change, right? So on that note, more and more, I see more and more of the customers that want to solve the big, hairy problems that previously couldn't be solved with technology, right? You've got AI, you've got new technology that are really helping drive this ability to tackle the really complex problems, which is a neat place to be, I think.
You know, we have a question from a viewer here that I'd like to insert, which is, well, why are we saying hyper and not meta? Now that meta is another fluff word, to use your terminology.
Yeah, I don't think we can use meta anymore, can we? I think that's
I don't know. Small m, not a capital M.
Yeah, I think those words could be interchangeable. What about you, Gretchen?
I agree.
Yeah. I think I think as long as you understand it and get it, that it's at kind of the highest strategic level. I think it doesn't matter what you call it, right?
So you want to move on to Sprawl, Steve?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's see. We'll come up next. So with that foundation and kind of the base, let's introduce a concept that I call hyperautomation sprawl. And let me see. I think I clicked a little too far there. Yep. So just like with any fast-growing landscape, so we talked about digital transformation, we talked about hyperautomation, how companies and organizations are diving in head first. With any fast-growing landscape, sometimes rapid expansion and growth can lead bigger problems, right? So in the case of hyperautomation, the drive to compete and drive profits has really led to rapid adoption of tools across IT business units in the organization. I like to liken it, and I stole this from one of our marketing gals, Leah. Shout out to you. She compared it to urban sprawl, right? So rapid urban growth that we've seen in some of the larger cities and some of the third world has really created massive issues, right? So urban sprawl has been correlated with an increase in energy use, pollution, traffic congestion, decline in community distinctiveness, and really a lack of cohesiveness across, kind of the grand landscape. So in the tech world, sprawl has similar effects on organizations, right? They struggle with high administrative costs. They have processes built by all types of users and all types of platforms. They struggle with licensing and services that are tapped out. And ownership and governance have really become an issue with a lot of the automation tools that organizations live with and use. So as I mentioned, now you've got this phenomenon of no-code, low-code tools for the citizen developer, right, or the everyday user. You've got tools that are managed by IT. You've got ones that are used by business technologists. And if you look at the technical landscape of a large organization, it contains multiple systems for the same exact type of uses. Now we can get down to the, and split hairs on the real, folks will say one system is different than another. But if I give you an example, so, a Fortune 500 organization that leverages 4 different RPA tools, each with its own document processing tool and required infrastructure. The same organization might have 4 integration platforms, disparate AI teams, and departmental workflows that might be housed in separate and disparate applications, like maybe their ERP system. So as you can see, with all these different levels and all these different kind of ownership entities, that sprawl becomes really unmanageable from a security and audit perspective. And with the advent of shadow IT and cloud-based services, for many organizations, the problem has really reached a critical mass and has become, almost unmanageable. So if you take those tools and we multiply them times the number of hyperautomation initiatives, which typically, according to Gartner, is around 4 to 10, you have confusion on how to pick the right tools, the right methods, and the right level in the organization to achieve the optimal value that they're looking for. And in many cases, what we're seeing is that sprawl is actually that reason.
And we've got another poll. Let's see how your math works out here, Steve. So how many different systems are in your hyperautomation toolbox? So, audience, you have the choice of less than 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, or over 10. So let's go and let you pick which one of these, less than 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, or 10 plus. And we should see answers coming in here and see if you're, Steve, see if your 4 to 10 as an average works out here. We'll put this to the test. How is your math really working out here?
Yeah. Interesting. Kind of evening out on the bottom 3.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go to the answers. I think we're pretty well done here. Okay. So less than 3, we've got 35%. 3 to 5, we've got 25%. 5 to 10, also 25%. Over 10, 15%. So I think your math is working out, Steve.
Falls in line. Greater than 1, right? So interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're talking about Sprawl here. So, Steve, what challenges does Sprawl present for customers in their hyperautomation efforts? Can you give an example?
Yeah, I think is the human race, right? Anytime we have too many choices, human nature kind of has us take the familiar path or the path of least resistance. So when you're talking about hyperautomation sprawl, the departmental and the no-code, low-code tools may be used for IT avoidance, right? Maybe to get the project started earlier, maybe avoiding any delays that might be incurred with a broader involvement. So it creates these locally managed systems that expand the sprawl and all the associated negatives. So we see it over and over, especially in a lot of work with our global consultancy partners, where the best tool for the job may not be used for political reasons or familiarity. And this level of technical debt that has to be repaid is kind of built over time that results in that sprawl.
Interesting. So Gretchen, in your world, where do your initiatives for automation usually start? Are they IT driven or business unit driven, or are they at the organizational level?
Great question, Mary D. It really depends on where the momentum, excitement, and also the funding is for the initiative. So it can come from anywhere, and we often see it too. It can come from finance, IT, business, because automation is the technology enabling the business processes and tasks. Wherever the opportunity is identified is where we see it start. It can be from any business or technology unit throughout the enterprise.
Are the challenges different depending on where it comes from?
Yeah, they are. If the initiative starts with IT, then there's some initial understanding of the technical features and considerations involved. And then the challenge is really to demonstrate the value to the business and to gain the buy-in with the business. Developing a joint team of business and technology specialists on the planning, design, and implementation of the automation is one of the ways that we can overcome some of the challenges with these initiatives starting from different groups. Then again, if it starts in the business, you have to get IT on board, right? So regardless of where the initiative comes from, the best outcomes are always going to come from cross-functional teams that are designing and implementing the solution together.
I would guess that those cross-functional teams also need to have it either explained to them or to just intrinsically recognize the value to the overall organization.
Absolutely. Tying every initiative into the priorities of the organization gives meaning and urgency to it.
Urgency is good, yeah. Okay, so Steve, we're back to cheaper, faster, better. So how does this sprawl that you were talking about, how does it impact success?
Yeah, I think in many ways it can stymie the overall impact of process and business automation, right? So either through using tools that can't support to kind of that rise of max value, or just by fixing a single problem that might be departmental and creating others through increased administrative burden, or maybe a process that can't be updated and improved readily. So one example, we do a lot of work in accounts payable automation, and we've seen with a lot of the legacy companies, they come in, they do the project, they set things up, and they walk away. So somebody from the outside has built this system of automation that works great day one, right? But needs change over time. So as time goes on, as new vendors are added, as needs change within the department and within the process, a lot of times it's not as easy to update those systems, or they might have to do a whole new update project with IT. So at that point, they stop gleaning value, and in many cases, they start incurring time loss and things like that with a process that's just outdated. So using the right tool and making sure that that you don't have multiple tools working on the same process becomes really important at that point.
Yeah, I would think that you set up a system, and if it's not flexible and adaptable, it degrades in success as time goes on.
Yeah.
It may have been the right tool at the time, but 10 years later, maybe it's not.
Yeah, I mean, things, older systems can misinterpret things and create more havoc and more delays. And, using the right tool for the right job, managed by the right folks, can prevent that. So.
Yeah, carrying on from that
that's
direction.
really interesting.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Mary D. Really quickly, to add to that, we often see with our public sector clients that it's often the case they don't have one tool, they have every tool available, right? And kind of in the spirit of having a balanced position with cloud and other providers. But you're right, like maintaining multiple tools capable of similar capabilities is really expensive. There's a high learning curve for both business and technology users. We're managing multiple environments, the governance that goes along with it. So our public sector clients, they often see this sprawl happen really quickly. And then when they realize it, right, then they have to go through an application rationalization engagement to better match and align the business capabilities with the technology tools. So we definitely see this as a factor impacting success in public sector.
That's a great point, and I, my favorite comment from a customer is, oh, the guy with all the knowledge left.
Oh no.
But we have another tool we can use, or we have somebody who's on another. Then they start the project all over again, right? Because they don't have the expertise, or they don't want to spend the budget to bring somebody like Slalom in that might have expertise in one of those systems. So there's a lot of factors that can make that a crazy loop, right?
I've never seen a situation where reinventing the wheel actually works.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
So true.
All right, I think
Steve,
we're ready for the next one. Huh?
Yeah, why don't we move on to Sprawl and IDP?
Yeah, so a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Now that we have an understanding of we're level set for hyperautomation, we've talked about the Sprawl issue, and the fact that Sprawl can span all different types of systems. Let's focus on an area that our panel has expertise in, which is document automation and intelligent document processing, just for some focus over the next few minutes here. So Sprawl has been an issue in the area of content and document ingestion for many reasons. The first is one of the highest rated areas of focus for organizations is content ingestion. How do I get content on board? How do I automate it? Automate the extraction of the data and the routing of content. And making that worse is that just about 60% of all processes within a business require documents or some other type of record. So for this reason, all the RPA vendors, all the workflow vendors either have document processing modules within their platforms, or they plug into things like Google Cloud OCR or Amazon TextRact. So documents are really the low-hanging fruit, and the automation of these workflows can really show great improvements in business outcomes, and folks typically focus on them as kind of those initial projects to kind of sink their teeth into. But the sheer number of tools available to end users in this space, business technologists, IT, have really led to a lot of sprawl in this key area for most organizations. So removing that friction from any business essentially removes the issues at the point of entry. Think about your day-to-day activities and how many revolve around documents, PDFs, those types of things. The invoice that's an email attachment, the contract from legal, the government or healthcare form that's been filled out, HR documentation, right? Getting down to this low-level task area and providing accurate, correct data to decision makers that's automated can really have an enormous impact. I think we're on to the panel.
So when you talk about friction, and documents. Steve, what do you, could you just give me a little more on that? Talk to me more about what sort of friction are you seeing, and does it vary by type of document?
Yeah, so the way I picture this is picture the bits and bytes coming into an organization. They're flying at the speed of light, right? They're zooming into the organization, but every one of those documents that comes in comes with overhead. So an example might be the data contained within the document that needs to be entered into a system of record. Maybe you've got admin personnel checking for signatures, ensuring all pages are attached. So all that friction slows down the process. And what if we could remove those? That's really where IDP comes in and provides what I like to call the grease that nearly eliminates that friction and provides an automated, smooth flow of documents into the organization.
Okay. So, Gretchen, I know you've done some fairly large document process automation projects. Why don't you talk to me about one of them and how this friction was removed or minimized?
Absolutely. So we were working with one of our large healthcare insurance companies recently around automating their invoice processing, which is a very typical use case for automation. And the client had different invoices coming in from various suppliers, all in different formats, and the time it took for human beings to process these invoices was very high. And that's that friction, that data entry, that manual matching, that process and task level friction that we can apply automation to help remove and grease the process, like Steve said. So we helped the client leverage RPA and IDP to extract data out of the PDFs and the various other invoice formats, and finding individual line items, not just the header info from the invoices, and then automatically match them to the purchase orders in their PeopleSoft environment. So we used machine learning to tag the data elements in the documents, train the model to improve in accuracy. At first, at the outset, we were looking at about 30% accuracy in terms of automated PO matching to PeopleSoft. We trained that model to increase to 60% accuracy level on automation. So that's an example of where we help take a very time-intensive, friction-heavy process and grease it with automation so that the client could not only save time and money from the introduction of IDP, but also automating that process frees up staff time to really focus on higher value, more proactive work. And we're in our current environment with current labor shortages and supply chain issues and everything else, we're seeing this as absolutely an imperative for our clients.
Yeah, interesting how the phrase supply chain has suddenly come top of mind for a lot of people who'd never used it before as a term.
Yeah.
So you were talking about the accounting department, accounts payable, and so on. But Steve, are these the only areas of high friction within organizations? Does it differ by industry?
Yeah, I think AP is typically top of mind because it's just so painful. I mean, all the invoices are different. They come from different vendors. There's different data formats. So it's a real nice fit and a good project to start with. Typically, we see high document flows in accounting, legal, sales, case management, billing. Our top industries and where we focus are banking, financial services, and government, because they have always had high document loads and will continue to for the foreseeable future. And they have high processing requirements. They have service level agreements where they have to turn documents around really quickly to get them back. And then there's those horizontal solutions, right, like AP, which applies to everybody. But that's typically those are the high document flow areas as well as top industries that we see.
Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that every organization has an accounting department.
Correct.
So, Gretchen, when you're dealing with customers, do most of them actually know what their friction points are? And if they don't, how do you help them find them?
Sometimes they know what they are, and that's why they engage with Slalom, but sometimes they don't, and they suspect there are areas to improve operational efficiency and streamline processes within their organization through introducing automation. Finding those friction points is part of the process analysis work that Slalom does with clients, either with a business analyst or an automation specialist. But basically, we start with a goal: faster, cheaper, work reduction, whatever the goal is, and then we look for levers to affect this change. We use a combination of process mining, right, other modern analysis tools, so that we can identify what are those processes with considerable time delays, manual processing, where is that friction, and that's where we want to focus first. And then measure and realize value as quickly as possible, since this is the starting point of our automation, and we want to drive user adoption and support throughout the enterprise.
My totally uneducated guess is that the friction points would be more obvious to the people on the front lines than top management. Am I correct, or am I totally off base here?
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct that business understands where the process inefficiencies are more from an anecdotal perspective. IT can identify process efficiencies in seeing the way that tasks and documents and data move through systems. So it's a combination of both.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories was a hospital billing department that would receive PDFs via email, print them out, split them up, and then rescan them to process. And this was only a year ago. Yeah. So definitely a frontline worker, but management was seeing the lack of service level agreement. They weren't meeting it very often. So it's interesting. So.
Fascinating, yeah. So, so Steve, what do we do to navigate this sprawl?
Well, I'll tell you. I think we have an answer. So the question is, as Mary Dee mentioned, is what are organizations doing to manage the sprawl and consolidate systems and their approach to hyperautomation, right? So. Let's dive into our final section and provide some insight on how you can navigate and avoid the sprawl in your automation efforts and really consolidate down to the right tool to provide fast, accurate decision data to your decision makers. So, diffuse and siloed automation provide a small return on any effort and spend, and without analyzing kind of the start to finish processes and the effects across departmental lines, narrowly focused automation can provide results at the lower tiers of the business value chain, right? Cost savings and efficiency, but just for the business unit. So getting the right data to the right people at the right time requires modern systems and simple integration. It doesn't really help if only a few select hold those keys to the kingdom. And finally, with more data and systems at their fingertips, users are finding decision-making more and more difficult in the organization. So I think we have a poll next here.
We have a poll, indeed.
Final tips, yeah.
Yes, we do. You're all thrilled, I know. Here's our third poll. So who mainly deploys automation solutions in your organization? You get to select one of these. Is it IT? Is it business technologists? Is it citizen developers? Love that term, by the way. Or is it all of the above? So let me move on here and let you, audience, select IT, business technologists, citizen developers, or all of the above. So you've got loads of opportunities here to tell us just who's in charge for deploying these solutions within your organizations.
Interesting. A lot more all of the above.
They're coming
in.
They're flowing in. Yes.
IT still holds the keys to the kingdom, though, right? So.
Well, they didn't originally. It started out with all of the above, and now we have IT gaining. And yeah, I think that's it. Okay, so IT is the winner, 44%, and all of the above coming in at a third there. So
okay, let's.
and we do have.
Yeah,
We didn't. You didn't give a choice here for other, but we do have an other that somebody stuck in the chat box, which is it's via committee.
Oh, nice, interesting. Yeah. So let's focus on what I call the money slide, and these are some trends that we're seeing best practice organizations focus on to pick the right tool for the right job, consolidate, make sure that they have systems that can be secure, repeatable, and used by just about everybody. So this is what we're seeing in the market, and how organizations are simplifying their hyperautomation efforts and really navigating that sprawl of systems and data that engulf them every day. So if you look through the IDP lens, this is a list that I think can apply to all the other systems and really trends seen across industries. So first off is the migration of legacy systems are a key priority. So in this agile age of hyperautomation, it's really difficult to support non-cloud systems, and they're being mothballed. And new cloud-based or hybrid systems are a key focus for any of their automation plans, especially hyperautomation. Best-in-class platforms that can service needs across the entire organization that a user in accounting can use, but that the IT developer can kind of lift up the hood and do some customization, are really helping reduce that sprawl. Purpose-built and adaptive AI systems that support these models can take organizations to the next level and eliminate some of those redundant systems or systems that are requiring a human in the loop, right? So you can kind of take your processes to the next level. So to provide that data at the right place and right time, interoperability is a key system trait here. And in a nutshell, the system that provides the highest quality, the speed and agility required for the business really wins the race in this reduction of sprawl as companies are honing their toolkits and reducing and eliminating that problem. And those systems really provide the best business outcomes for the organization. On to a discussion.
And we have, yeah. So, Gretchen, Steve was giving his trends. In your world, what are the trends your clients are adopting to provide better business outcomes?
Yeah, we're working with clients to start from the vision and work backwards always. What's the vision for the use of data? What's the vision for the customer experience? What's the vision for the employee experience? And then we start by identifying, where are we today? So we know where we want to get to, where are we today, and then we can identify the initiatives and investments that are needed to move our clients from current state to the future vision. It's specifically for automation. We've seen this space move so quickly in the last couple of years in terms of sophistication and functionality, right? A couple of years ago, these projects were just basic task automation. Now our clients are focusing on applying automation across their end-to-end processes. So really, really excited to see the advances in the capabilities of these automation tools as we work to align the tools with meeting the business outcomes, which we're always starting, right, with the vision. Where do we want to get to? Where are we today? And then identify the plan to reach and accomplish the vision.
What about cloud adoption? You talked about all the changes in the past few years in client projects. Where does cloud adoption come into this? Has it helped with the automation projects?
Steve. Absolutely, and Steve, you've covered some of this. Thank you. It was great. As our clients they've already adopted the cloud. Being in the cloud helps lower the entry costs and barriers to automation, right? They no longer need to determine how the technology is going to live in their environment. There's no infrastructure set up. Then clients can get to realizing the benefits of automation faster and easier. So I'd say we definitely cloud solutions help our clients take full advantage of all the innovative product updates and improvements to kind of the recognition and the processing abilities of these tools. Those are constantly improving, and so clients being on the cloud can much more easily leverage the automation tools and capabilities.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We've seen a massive, we've seen massive growth. Our cloud business grew 140% last year. So folks are really leaving those kind of managed on-premise older implementations and really moving to the cloud for, like Gretchen said, just to get things going faster and ease the management overhead.
Steve, the other thing that I keep hearing is the word platform, and it's such an overused term. I just wondered, maybe we should pause for a minute here and define it. And how are platforms key?
Yeah, I think the word platform just defines a system that has deep focused functionality, but allows you to build and customize. And most platforms have interactive capability, but they also provide all their services via API. So really, It's one system, best in class, that when it comes to specific needs in hyperautomation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. And thanks to Stephen and Gretchen for this presentation. Now we're going to turn to questions from the viewers. And let's see, the first one that came in here is, we have a ton of handwritten government forms. Does Ephesoft's technology help with these types of processes?
We sure do, yeah. We've seen a very high demand, especially in insurance and government, for handwritten forms processing. Our new release, we're releasing advanced handwriting capabilities where we can very accurately extract hand-printed and handwritten data. And we've got some other cool technology that's coming out end of next month that will help in that as well. So great capabilities today, even better capabilities in the near future.
I sure hope you never
Steve,
have to deal with a document that I hand wrote.
Go ahead, Gretchen.
When we think about government forms and handwriting will likely exist into perpetuity, right? From an accessibility standpoint, we need to be providing that omni-channel customer engagement. So this is something that's not going to be going away. And as much as we can automate the processing of the data on that in the documents, then we're relieving human beings from doing more sophisticated tasks.
That's a great point, because often I hear technologists say, "Oh, we're just going to build a web form, or we're going to do this or do that. We're going to make it all digital, no paper." Government doesn't work that way. Not everybody has a computer, and they require accessibility for everybody, regardless of whether you own technology or not. So totally agree. It's going to be around for quite a while. So.
And we have another question here. Is Sprawl just limited to IDP? And let's make sure that we know what that acronym stands for.
Intelligent document processing. And I would say that Sprawl applies to all different types of systems that have redundant capabilities in an organization that need to be managed. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Gretchen, but.
I totally agree. And in public sector, we often see, because of the government operating environment, from their budgeting and procurement and other operating environment factors, that impact the way the agencies invest in technology. So they're often purchasing to solve for a use case, not investing in a platform that's going to serve its organization and its enterprise use cases.
Okay. Do you have any data with respect to the impact that hyperautomation might have on business insurance, especially when considering the potential impact on data privacy and protection? I think people are really interested in privacy and protection these days.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in on that. I know that for us, especially with cloud services, privacy and security is top of mind in everybody's when folks are looking for a solution. We've gone to extreme measures. We're SOC 2 certified, and we have auditors that come in and review our security and privacy policies to make sure that we comply in just about every conversation or implementation, especially in financial services and government. There's definitely talk about, what are our privacy policies? Talk to me about security. I'm sure you see the same, Gretchen. It's just top of mind for folks.
Absolutely.
We've touched on this, but I think this is worth asking again. So this viewer says, our organization has no plans to implement hyperautomation, but I'm a strong advocate that they should. What real-life examples can I use to help convince them?
Gretchen, you want to take that one?
Sure. Well, one of the examples I brought up was with our healthcare insurance. It's interesting, and another person is asking about ROI. The out-of-the-box functionality is very impressive. So, like, before even training the model, it was 30% accurate, automatically matching invoices to the record. Those are the types of things where if you start to actually investigate what's that level of effort today, if we multiply out by the number of invoices and the time it takes, it's a huge return. So those are the types of things where I think if you start to decompose the process efficiencies and actually measure and quantify them in terms of likely time delay you're going to reduce, manual effort you're going to reduce, accuracy you're going to increase, and you put all of those together, and it paints a picture of where you're really going to get the return on your investment.
Yeah, I think I call it pencil math, right? You can sit down just about any place that manually processes documents, take out your pencil and a piece of paper, and just do the math. How many people are processing for how many hours a day? How much data is entered? How much time does it take them? And you can figure out really quickly, just right out of the gate, the types of savings that we're talking about, let alone Slalom that comes in and does an engagement and actually goes top to bottom looking for process inefficiency. So it picks some low-hanging fruit, do the math, and essentially the systems pay for themselves, if not in a few months, in easily in a year. So,
Mary, if I could just chime in, I wouldn't be a good management consultant if I didn't bring up the change management aspect of this, because a lot of what we're talking about, right, is the technology.
True.
Is the technology implementation, and that's not typically the hardest part of these engagements. Getting the human beings to know how is their job changing, what's the benefit to them for this, how are they going to process things in the new environment, and be able to understand, internalize, and communicate what's in it for me is really, really important. So we can drive user adoption, drive buy-in, drive in overall support and energy for automation.
I always say that technology works. It's the people that sometimes are the problem, and that definitely ties into that. So.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I would suspect that management is expecting a pretty firm business case. So you have to be able to define exactly what hyperautomation will do for you in your individual organization.
Yeah, I think the great part about the technology today is that you can start small and grow. You can do a proof of concept, get everybody's confidence that the system's going to work, that it's not going to replace people's jobs, that it's for the better of the organization. And I think it makes sense to do that type of progression on projects as well.
That's a great point, Steve. And we see a lot of our clients start with a proof of concept. Let's prove out that this works and generates value for our people in our organization, and then let's invest further, but do it strategically so we don't create the sprawl that we've been talking about, right?
Yeah, agreed. I think we're coming up on time here. Have any other
are.
Yeah.
Do either of you have closing comments?
Go ahead. I'll let you go first, Gretchen.
Sure. Well, Steve and Mary D, thank you so much for allowing Solemn to join this conversation. I am so excited personally and professionally to see more adoption of hyperautomation and Ephesoft capabilities with our public sector clients, because I think it's going to make a real difference for the human beings who work day in and day out. And ultimately is to get, technology enables us getting the right information to the right people at the right time, ultimately to deliver the right outcome, which is really what we're trying to do.
Yeah, that's great. And thank you too as well. I appreciate your time and effort. And everybody on the call, if you have any questions or want to see what AI and document processing can do for your organization, we'll be sending a follow-up email, and you can respond, and we'll help you out with your needs both now and in the future. That's all I got.
And don't forget those handouts.
Yep. Handouts to download.
Yeah, handouts to download, right. So, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for questions today, and we apologize we were unable to get to all of your questions, but as I stated earlier, all questions will be answered via email. And I would like to thank our speakers today, Stephen Bowles, SVP Strategy and Evangelism, Ephesoft, Gretchen Perry, Senior Director, Slalom Consulting. If you would like to review this event or send it to a colleague, please use the same URL that you used for today's event. It will be archived for 90 days. Plus, you will receive an email with the URL to view the webinar once the archive is posted. And if you would like a PDF of the deck, go to the handout section once the archive is live. Just for participating in today's event, you could win this $100 Amazon gift card. The winner will be announced on March 31st. We will reach out via email if you are selected as this month's winner. And thank you again for joining us.